done to me the last 5 minutes.
Come on, computer. What are you doing to me?
Do we have to wait till the Camelot interview is over? So I'm gonna call him out of order. Is that okay?
Yeah, me.
He's going to be 30 seconds early. Quite well. Get his doctorate.
I met him at
He's very good. Just telling her. This was used, I think. Sad. You knew tonight?
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the February 24th, 2010 regular meeting of the Parkway School District Board of Education. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Ms. Kleiner.
Mrs. Castillo?
Here.
Mrs. Feldman?
Here.
Mr. Jacob?
Here.
Mr. Major?
Here.
Mr. McCarter?
Here.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here. 3.0 special recognitions. This evening we have no formal special recognitions, but with the permission of the board, I would like to adjust the agenda and call for 9.01. We have a special guest this evening, Mr. Gary Forsey, President of the University of Missouri, and I believe Mr. McCarter, you have a... Thank you.
Notice very much years on the board that people here before us.
Great.
Todd, could we get this kind of turned on for Mr. McCarty?
I've noticed when people appear before the board, they're very formal. And they start out and they say, Dr. Melito, President Davis, and it's very structured and rigid. I want to depart from that a little bit. Since I'm one of your colleagues, I'm going to say, Bob, good evening to you, Jay, Bruce, Helen, Chris, Dee, Beth, Ann, Carol, good evening. And good evening to our principals and other friends and administrators of Parkway and Parkway parents and students. It is with great pleasure tonight that I am going to introduce the president of the University of Missouri System, Gary Forsey. And I think we are very fortunate to have him here tonight, and I'm looking forward to his remarks, as I know all of you are. I'm sure many, if not all of you, are aware of the extreme pressures being placed on public higher education in Missouri and around the country, particularly in these difficult economic times. Public higher education. And unfortunately, that funding is likely to decrease in the next few years. President Forsey is committed to doing more with less, not less with less, so that our historic public university, the oldest land-grant university west of the Mississippi, will not jeopardize its core mission of teaching, research, service, and economic development. Under President Forsey's leadership, the University of Missouri has positioned itself to be part of the solution to the state's economic crisis, not part of the problem. Now, as a partner in public education with the university, we can all appreciate the value of education and the lifelong benefit that accrues to every student through learning. But in a very specific and unique way, we here at Parkway are key players in the P20 education continuum in our state. And as a result, we should have a vested interest in the success and well-being of each of the 4 campuses of our state's sole public land-grant research university. Now, as President Forsey will share with us in a moment, the Parkway School District and the University of Missouri are inextricably entwined in a number of different ways. And I view the Parkway School District as a partner with the University of Missouri System, and I know President Forsey feels that way also. So I encourage all of us tonight to listen carefully and to take heart in what President Forsey has to say about public higher education, and in particular, the University of Missouri. It is evolving, and we here at Parkway must do all we can to partner with our public educational institutions and support the effort to make Missouri a leader in public education, both at the high school level and at the higher education level. Now, on a personal note, I want you to know that I have the honor of serving as co-chair of the University of Missouri 100 at the request of President Forsey, and I gladly accepted those challenges. And I've been able to see firsthand his energy, his enthusiasm, and his dedication, not just to higher education and the University of Missouri, but to the economic well-being of the state of Missouri. And I'm confident that under President Forsey's leadership, the University of Missouri system will be one of the best, if not the premier, public university system in the United States. His attendance tonight makes me very proud. I think it should make all of us here at Parkway very proud. And it's a real honor for him to be here tonight, and I hope you all welcome him, and I'm very excited to hear what he has to say. Ladies and gentlemen, President Gary Forsey.
Dudley, I appreciate those kind words. Your introduction was almost as long as my remarks, so I'll certainly try to be brief. You all should know that we would be very fortunate at the University of Missouri and across our state to have supporters like Dudley McCarter. He is one of a kind in terms of his support to his institution, but more importantly to all that's important to higher education in our state. I'll apologize in advance for not making the full 360 here, but I'll certainly want to pay attention to the board, which has been so kind, and to you, Bob, for your allowing me to take some of your agenda tonight. If I could leave you with a thought on the front end before I get into my comments, it would be to recognize what the Parkway District has done for young people in the St. Louis area. The results and the record has obviously been sustainable over many years, and something that this district and region should be proud of. Second point I would leave you with is for administrators, for teachers, for parents that are here tonight, those of you that are volunteers to support what goes on. Thank you so much for what you do. I told a group at dinner a while ago, I thought I knew a lot about higher education in my 36 years in industry, kind of looking from outside in. But rest assured, when you look from inside out, you become significantly appreciative of those that are teachers, those that spend their time with our young people, and certainly those that are in administrative roles, as well as the volunteers that provide part of the government support. The final thing I would leave you with is to be sure that we all think about education and its importance in our nation's recovery and our state's recovery. As Dudley said, education, whether it's higher education, elementary or secondary, has to view that it takes a responsibility to be part of the solution. Our elected officials ought to look to education to be a partner in finding solutions for obviously some very difficult challenges. So I would leave that with you, that's a responsibility that certainly the University of Missouri and our 4 campuses are wanting to step up to. So I've got a very brief outline. I would hope to leave a few minutes at the end for questions to get some dialogue going, but I will step through very quickly what a great job Parkway is doing, how the collaborations that we have underway across this district as well as around the state I think are mutually beneficial for Missourians. I'll talk a little bit about some bragging rights. I asked Mike Alden yesterday at a Boy Scout event if bragging rights was a branded term or had some intellectual property. He assured me it wasn't, so I kind of like to use that as I talk about not only what Parkway is doing, but as well as University of Missouri. I want to spend a little bit of time, but I won't dwell on it. There are some national issues that I think are incredibly important for our state to understand, for the University of Missouri to understand in its leadership role, and certainly Parkway District plays a critical role in that, and I'll spend just a couple minutes looking ahead. There we go. You know, when you think about what goes on in Parkway, the ability for students to be successful, it really is a continuum. And the fact that the Parkway District and the role it plays in West County, and as Dudley, I don't think, mentioned, my wife Sherry, just a few years ago, was a student teacher in this system. A few years ago, I'm using that a bit illustrative, more like 40 years ago. But in any event, and I lived twice in St. Louis growing up in Sherry as a St. Louis, and so we know about the history of St. Louis, and we know how important this district is to that degree. But as you think about the continuum and you think about the role that the University of Missouri plays, and I'll use that term, but I also want to be very clear tonight, I want to talk about public higher education. And we have 10 other very important institutions in the state that provide that role. There are many private institutions or independent institutions that we also partner with in community colleges. So while I'll certainly have a flavor tonight about the University of Missouri, and perhaps parochially so, I want to be sure that my comments are taken in the context of the role that we all play in higher education and our partners in community colleges and independent institutions as well. So again, as you think about that continuum and coming full circle, the graduates that have been part of this Parkway system continue to play an important role, both at the board level as well as many of the principals, administrators I had a chance to have dinner with tonight. You know, as Dudley said, this is a challenging time, and I won't go back all the history of what has gone on in our state in terms of its support for higher education from an appropriation standpoint. But as we sit here today, the state of Missouri is 47th in per capita funding of higher education. In the context of the University of Missouri, we have added 15,000 students to our 4-campus system since the year 2001. That's a 25% growth rate in students. During that period of time, our appropriations as of 2010 are not yet back to, on an absolute basis, to where it was in 2001. 15,000 new students, 25% growth rate. Our appropriations of nearly $440 million, not yet back to where we were in the year 2001. I would suggest to you that our priorities and the way we have thought about education and its role in our state's economy and culture going forward perhaps needs to be examined with those facts in mind. You know, I saw these statistics a few weeks ago, and frankly, they're just stunning because I get inundated with averages. And when you deal with averages, you find out, you know, there's some that you assume are at the top and some that you assume at the bottom. But I think these statistics would put Parkway as one of the nation's premier districts, not just the state of Missouri. So the going to college rate of 93%, the National Merit Awards, the students with perfect ACT scores, again, just an incredible record. And again, just so you know, one of the statistics that I carry around is a statistic that says that right now in our state, we're roughly 50% of a going rate toward college. And those that start 9th grade have a chance of only 19% of getting a 4-year college degree after high school plus 6 years. So again, as we think about our state's economy, think about some of the challenges that our country faces, those are certainly issues to be kept in mind. We have a lot of students from the Parkway District now across our 4 campuses. I've had the privilege in the last 2 years, in fact 2 years last week, of being president of the 4-campus University of Missouri system. So our chancellor at University of Missouri St. Louis, where I spent today, Missouri S&T, where I'm an alumnus from, Mizzou, of course, the flagship campus in Columbia, and University of Missouri Kansas City are all proud recipients of Parkway District graduates, and as you can see, those are inclusive of our professional programs at each of those campuses. So again, an outstanding record, and one that this group and certainly the administrators and Bob, to your entire team, should be very proud of. I understand there is a Parkway Alumni Hall of Fame, and again, liberally sprinkled with Mizzou alums, with UMKC, with UMS alums, and again, that Hall of Fame includes lots of luminaries, some football players that are still on track that will probably end up in that category in the future, we hope, including the quarterback. That's at Mizzou right now. By the way, the halftime score of Mizzou is up by 18 points. Not that I pay attention to those type of things. So again, lots of bragging rights, but I think importantly, what the students say about their experiences, and that I think cuts both directions. What the students say as they're leaving the Parkway District and as they have experiences at the university. And I think what I reflected as I saw the comments from students, that they understand the valued relationship that teachers provide, that parents provide, and they've had the opportunity, both at the Parkway District as well at the University of Missouri, to see those play out. Let me tell you just one example that I heard about. It's a quote from Sarah, who's a senior at MU and a student teacher at Oak Brook. Her experience that you can see from that quote, I think, establishes what I just said, and that the knowledge that she is gaining at MU in this case, coupled with what she was able to achieve here at Parkway, will certainly put her in good stead as she moves forward. The opportunities for Parkway students, you all know this, and I had a chance to meet those that help students find their pathways when they leave Parkway. We have an incredible array of professional schools, and my youngest daughter is a graduate of the veterinary school. She's still in flight. She's now doing a surgical residency as a veterinarian, so it's just a way of saying that we are unique in that regard. And I think one of the items that I would point out is that Mizzou, MU, is one of only 6 public universities in the country that has a school of medicine, a school in veterinary medicine, a school of law, engineering, and agriculture. So you think about the teaching opportunities, the research opportunities, the collaboration that occurs across those schools. And I'm so impressed when I have a chance, like I did today, to interact with our teachers, with our faculty, and the research that they're doing, more typically than not, is cutting across those disciplines. At the School of Medicine at Mizzou, we have collaborative research going between vet med and between engineering. We have experimental activities going on and research going on between Missouri S&T and the School of Metallurgical Sciences and the School of Dentistry at UMKC. And you can think about, again, the applications that might unfold. So again, we're unique in that regard and something that we can continue to provide support for Parkway as we move forward. More than 111,000 alumni from the University of Missouri live in the St. Louis region. So obviously, you are one of the key pipelines toward our 4 campuses, and in return, our 4 campuses, obviously in addition to Parkway, are a very significant source of employers and employee opportunities to this region. So let me move away from bragging rights and move into some of the issues and challenges that we see. I've used these 2 magazine covers on a few occasions over the last few months to really try to put into context some of the challenges that we face as a nation in regards to higher education. And on the left, this is a surrogate for the cost of higher education. While we had the rapid enrollment growth in the decade of the 2000s, we've also had significant tuition increases in the Missouri's 4-year public institutions. While we had absolute increase in enrollment, decline in state support, we had a 75%, almost 75% increase in tuition during that period of time. So on the left side, in the Newsweek magazine, why should college take only 3 years? It's not how do we lessen the requirements, it's how do we reduce the cost. Not less hours, but the cost of education, which now bumps up against 5 years. Is there a way of having that cycle work for students that want to go year-round, that want the flexibility of evening, day, weekend, tri-semesters, and so forth around the cost of education? We know that students now are leaving with an incredible level of debt. And it's a period of time where, the cycles and the cost of that will continue to be an issue that they face. Coupled now with the Right magazine, Business Week, which talks about the challenges and I think uses the term very directly, the lost generation, meaning what's happened to the job market. And we know in the St. Louis region, around the state, around the country, that those that have been large employers of graduates have decreased their employment. They've delayed employment in some cases. They've stopped coming to campuses to recruit. The internships and the partnerships have all stagnated, certainly in the last 2 or 3 years. So the national discussion that's underway is the value of higher education. And I would submit to this group, as I talk around the state and talk at different forums with alumni and with supporters, we can't lose sight of culturally what it means to have an educated community, what it means from a skill set in terms of attracting employers into the state of Missouri, and certainly what it means to create jobs that we know employers of the future in Missouri will need to be accountable for. So this, I think, sets up magazines that were a week apart last fall, sets up part of the challenge that I think we all have as we continue to think about the role that education plays. This is the proverbial top 10 list. This is not Gary's list or the state of Missouri's list. This is a national list of top higher education issues. But as you look through there, rest assured, Missouri's list would look just the same as this national list. Everything from accountability for outcomes. So if you're a student or a parent, you want to be sure that you're getting the best arrangement possible for your student. Access and student success. One of the hallmarks of the University of Missouri as a land-grant institution is our ability to provide access, open access for students to find their way to the University of Missouri on one of our 4 campuses, as well as the affordability and the tuition support that goes along with that. And when you think about 75% increase in tuition in the past decade, you start to wonder, have we put that access ability for students to be able to afford a public higher education at risk? Budgets and state funding, we've talked about that, student aid policies, and certainly a very significant positive discussion, I think, going on nationally around the expectation of student outcomes. How do we get students started? In some cases, that may be a community college route that all can provide a clear pathway to 4-year institutions, and we want to be sure we support that. Tax policies and benefits. This is one, as I saw on the list, was curious about, but when you think about the state of Missouri, and I did it as Bob read my State of the University address a few weeks ago, the state of Missouri has had leakage, if I can use that term, in its tax policies that have contributed to $1.3 billion in what I would consider to be lost revenue opportunity in the past decade because of one-off decisions that have been made. So I'm not here to advocate tonight increasing taxes, and that's not the point, but the decisions that can get made in the cycle of the General Assembly may look harmless and innocent along the way, but when you look backwards and where we are now, that $1.3 billion could come in quite handy, actually. Benefits, our costs are going up just like everyone's around the country in terms of health care and pension benefits. E-learning, spent some time today with our faculty talking about the benefits of the flexible nature of e-learning, yet from a faculty member standpoint, we have to be sure that we're willing to make investments in the technology tools to support them. Diversity, both in terms of student body as well as faculty. We should mirror the communities in which we operate. And certainly the final point around competition from not-for-profit institutions. And competition generally is a healthy thing. It would tend to cause us to be sure that we're willing to examine paradigms along the way. We've had an incredible run at the University of Missouri. We have accounted for about 85% of the overall higher education growth during this period of time. We account for about 50% of the absolute students in the state in our 4 institutions, so we have disproportionately grown during that period of time. I think that's a testimony to those that traveled in the University of Missouri before me, certainly. Our 4 chancellors clearly understand the unique mission of each of our 4 campuses and have done a good job in continuing to build, if I can use the term, the brands and what each of those campuses stand for. But with growth comes some growing pains. It's interesting, the last week and a half I've been on 3 of our 4 campuses. Of course, I spend most of my time in Columbia, but in sessions with students at UMKC, at UMSL today, and at Rolla last Friday, guess what the top issue on their list was? Constrained parking. So 15,000 students in a very short period of time does produce some growing pains, but rest assured, for those Parkway students that are headed toward Mizzou, we'll get that taken care of. We have, I think, done an incredible job trying to anticipate the recession in the past couple of years, and this is not, me saying that for my benefit. It really is saying it for the ability of our chancellors and our administrators to understand that if we don't get ahead of the curve, then we could end up impacting quality, we could end up impacting our mission. And so we have really tried to be very contemporary in looking around the corner and doing things that weren't without difficulty, freezing salaries for the last couple of years, taking advantage of open positions to curtail cost. We had, for the very first time in our history, employees contribute to the pension plan because we could look in the next 5 years and see pension plan stress. Those are all activities that we did over the last couple of years that as we have taken that on, I can say to you today that our mission, our brand, our ability to deliver to the state is as strong as ever, if not getting stronger, because we tried to anticipate some of the difficult actions that may be confronting us. But we also said along the way that shouldn't we do more? shouldn't the state's premier public higher education institutions be accountable, frankly, to the state for being part of the solution? Shouldn't we work in the best of shared governance processes with our faculty to try to examine some of these national issues and paradigm shifts? So I have taken the liberty of working with each of our campuses and assigning out some very significant challenges to them. Last week, in a session at UMKC, bachelor degree completion programs with which UMSL is going to take on. I found out today that in the greater St. Louis area, there are 1,500 individuals that have 120 hours of credit but didn't get their degrees. 1,500 individuals, adults, in the St. Louis region that have 120 hours and didn't get their degrees. So did they miss a math course along the way or change their major? But the point is, isn't this a great time to reach back out into our communities, to reach back to the state and say, we want to help you finish off that degree process. So degree completion, I think, is a great thing for us to step up to. E-learning, to be sure that we're providing flexible and technological approaches. Clearer pathways from high school to college to community college. You all do such a great job here, and I told Bob I was trying to think of what challenge I could leave Parkway with. It's kind of to spread the news. You've got it figured out with 93% college going rate, but as you know, in the St. Louis metropolitan area, not everyone can say that. So I think one of the challenges, can we make it very clear for those that are in junior high that may not have had a role model opportunity, can we make it very clear for students to find a clear path to get to a community college or get to a four-year institution? And for our state, that certainly is one of those opportunities we're going to pursue. Last year, we took on, in addition to that list, a couple things that we believed were very important for, again, the University of Missouri to take on this notion of P20, which is really saying early childhood development, clear through graduate school, to be sure that the pipeline is strong. We've already talked earlier about some of the pipeline issues, but our opportunity to be sure that we have very clear programs, and as I indicated to the group at dinner, we have over 257 programs in our four-campus system, everything from the STARS program that many of you participate in, to summer camps to get students interested in science and math curriculums. We want to continue to do that, but also be sure that we make investments in those programs that can make the most difference. We also sometimes talk about remediation that occurs when students come to University of Missouri, that maybe they weren't quite as prepared in certain curriculums as we would expect when they arrive at one of our campuses. But I asked the question, well, what kind of job are we doing preparing students for the workforce? So we went out and did what I call an outside-in review, where we looked with Missouri's employers, large, small, public, and private, to be sure that we were meeting their needs, not on a specific curriculum basis, but 5 years from now. What are the Boeings going to be expected to do? What is the worldwide technology is going to be expected to do, and so forth. So to be sure that we were meeting the needs of Missouri's employers as part of our mission. I had a chance again at dinner to talk about one of the reasons that I'm so bullish, and I guess would use the term in that regard, is I think that Missourians, we are the show me state. And one of the opportunities I think we have is to continue to tell our story very clearly about why investing in education is important, and why investing, in this case, parochially at the University of Missouri, is going to provide a good return on the investment. So what we did, we were unabashed about looking around the country at who had the very best scorecard, who had the very best set of measures, and what you see shown on that chart and what I gave out to some folks at dinner is our version of that scorecard, our accountability measures. And this is 80-some measures that will measure each of our four campuses against their peer groups. So UMSL and UMKC will be measured against a set of urban institutions, Mizzou against the flagship institutions from around the country, and Raleigh will be measured against the engineering institutions. The point is to be sure that we understand from a parent's perspective, from a student's perspective, from a General Assembly's perspective, or those that are thinking about investing, that we are going to be accountable and transparent and deliver back in terms of that expectation, which I think at the end of the day is one of the most important things we can do. So that's a very quick trip through a lot of activities that we've had underway. And again, if I can leave you with one final thought is you ought to be proud in the Parkway District of the job that you are doing for the region and certainly for the students that have the privilege of moving through this system. We are certainly the benefactors of that at the University of Missouri, but speaking for the state, it's something that we would certainly hope to figure out over time how to emulate in other districts around the state, and I know that's something that Bob and your team are very interested in. I'd be pleased to take a couple minutes of questions, but you all are the timekeepers, so but I'll let you.
I will be glad to start. First of all, thank you very much for coming to Parkway. We are honored that the president of the university system would come to Parkway. What can we do to further spread the word about public education at your level in the St. Louis region area with our 20 or 30 public school districts in St. Louis County?
You know, I get asked that question a lot, and and Dudley knows this. It goes beyond, in my view, getting out the checkbook and the financial aspect. That's certainly important and always will be important. But I have added, I think, a couple of very important things to that over my last 2 years anyway. The first is to have a conversation about engagement, and certainly this group here, by your presence, is engaged and understand the importance of higher education. And I think as I've traveled around the state, and we actually did a survey that Fleischman Hilliard here in St. Louis supported for us last year, you find that there's not enough knowledge about the teaching that goes on, whether it's in the Parkway District or at the University of Missouri. There's not enough knowledge about the research that's being produced and the benefit that that's providing to the state, the nation, and the world. There's not enough understanding of the service and the economic development. So we've got work to do to communicate, and engagement's an important part of that. But the issue that I find more often than not that I worry about and spend time thinking about how to activate it, and literally every group I speak in front of now, I encourage citizens to get out into grade schools and junior highs and talk to kids. And I mean that very sincerely as a priority that I think we all have to understand. It is not as clear, and certainly Parkway is at the top of the mountain in that regard, but as you travel around the state, as you travel in rural Missouri, as you go to our inner cities, it is just not as clear, and we can't be as successful as we need to be in our state and country if we don't understand how we've got to get back further down the pipeline. Can't just wait for others to solve that along the way, and that's where a lot of my energy is going to be spent. How do we reinforce the notion that kids have to have a very clear path lighted for them, and I think that's important for us to do.
Thank you.
This isn't necessarily a question directed at you, but I'm just curious, with the people that we have here, would you mind standing up if you attended one of the schools in the University of Missouri system, just so we can get a feel for how many in the room?
Oh, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was just curious.
It's all good. It's all good. Keep them coming.
Well, I think that was going to be my comment as
I'm
well.
sorry.
That's okay. Just that we owe you and your institutions a great deal of thanks, too, for the product you send back to us in the form of MU fellows and full-time employees. We certainly, as an organization, have benefited from your product and the greater community as well. I know certainly my employer hires lots of S&T graduates, and so I thank you for being here tonight, and I thank you for your ongoing efforts to support public education.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and anything I can do in St. Louis and with Parkway, any of our chancellors, be sure that you know that we are at your service to do everything we can do. Thank you so much. Good night.
Can't get you on a time next week.
Thank you again, President Forsey. Let's see, 4.0, additions, corrections, and modifications to the agenda. Dr. Melito?
President Davis, we have 4 corrections or additions. In the personnel section, we have 1 resignation and 2 hirings, and we are removing for further study item 10.09, that board policy. We'd like to study a little bit further and bring back to you at a later date.
Thank you. 6.0, call for a closed session. None.
Citizens.
I'm sorry. I skipped over the citizen statements. And this evening we do have one. Mr. Greg Powers, please come to the podium, state your name and address. Carried away.
My name is Greg Powers. I live at 922 Windhaven Lane in Baldwin, Missouri. I actually spent 3 years on the Parkway School Board, which is where I got my gray hair. I was glad to listen to President Forsey's discussion. One of the things Dr. Melito can attest to is I call him on occasion about some of the things that I'm interested in, and one is to be more affordable for education, some of the partnerships with the junior colleges. Parkway is now getting involved with the A-plus program, which in my opinion is exciting, but maybe a little bit too late. My youngest is at Merrimack. I have one at Mizzou. I had one at Mizzou. Now she's at UMSL, and my wife is working on her master's degree at UMSL. So I'm all over the map. But to make college much more affordable, first of all, not everyone will go to college or should go to college. It's been my experience, not only my children, but other children are not always mature enough to know what they want when they start college. The junior college sometimes has a stigma, in my opinion. You know, it's not the University of Missouri, but I've encouraged my daughter to work hard and work her way to Mizzou. And again, these partnership programs, President Forsey talked about Mizzou. I did send an email, and I would assume, Carol, you sent it to the board about SEMO and that partnership agreement. You know, it's very interesting if you look, and if the guidance counselors in Parkway look, there are a lot of opportunities for students to get started and started early. And you know, the 3-year degree that President Forsey was talking about, this could be a good way for a lot of students. Not everybody is an A student. The A-plus program, I believe, you can be a C-plus student and qualify for the course. And a lot of children grow up a little bit later. You know, freshman year, they're still kids. Sophomore, still kids. Junior year, maybe it's a smaller percentage that are still kids. And, you know, the majority are not that mature as seniors even. They haven't made decisions, or they like to go to this college type of decision, and they don't know what they're going to major in. President Forsey, I think was talking about 120 hours that a lot of people had and didn't have a degree. I happen to have 150 hours, but I do have a degree. I went to Forest Park Community College and graduated from St. Louis University. Anyway, I think I'll wrap it up there. I'm very excited about some of the things that Parkway is doing. And as I said, some of the partnerships not only with the University of Missouri system, but other schools and universities in Missouri, and even Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. You'll receive a reply in writing from the board. Okay, now 6.0, call for a closed session. There is none. 7.0, approval of agenda for tonight's meeting, February 24th, 2010. Can I have a motion and second, please?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. 8.0 resolutions. We have several this evening. Read Across America, Dr. Seuss birthday, March 2nd. School Principals Day, March 4th. Youth and Art Month. Music in Our Schools Month. National Middle Level Education Month. National Nutrition Month. National Professional Social Workers Month. And Women's Rights Movement Month. Have a motion and second, please, to approve tonight's resolutions.
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. 9.0 communications. Moving to 9.02, calendar of meetings. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for Wednesday, March 10th, 2010, at Central Middle School at 7:30 p.m. Mr. Major?
Mr. President, my pleasure to introduce our two new board members, Mr. Tom Applebaum and Sam Sorrentino. Gentlemen, if you'd stand up and be recognized. They'll both be sworn in at our as new board members at the April 21st organizational meeting at 7 p.m. Absolutely looking forward to that. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. 9.03 Liaison Reports. Anyone?
Mr. President, two items I just wanted to mention. Earlier this week, had a chance to, with Beth, to go to the Green Trails school, and it was a delightful experience to see how those kids are learning in each of those schools. They'd hardly even noticed us when we walked in. They were so engaged, and it was just a good feeling in that school. And I think they do a lot of the right things there that many of our schools are doing. Couldn't help notice at the end, as we were kind of finishing up, I could hear Green Acres playing somewhere in the building. So I stuck my head in the gymnasium there, and they were jump roping, and they have several closets there that are where they keep things, storage, and each one they have a song, and then the Green Acres is 1 minute and 6 seconds, so if you can jump rope that long, you get to put your name on there. They challenged me to do that, and I'll do that next time I'm there. Didn't feel up to it this time, but it was kind of neat to see them doing that, because they really were engaged doing it, and if they got tired, they sat down, and a few could get off. The one up at the end was 6 minutes, and anyway, that was kind of fun. And then my little guy, 13-year-old 7th grader, one of his happiest things he can say is, "Grandpa, no homework." Well, last night we had a chance at the Spirit of Excellence to see some people that I don't know how they do in their homework, but I know that they do what they need to do to get the very best, because these are students, African American students, that are recognized for their excellence. And we're talking about students from 3rd grade up through the end of high school that are getting 3.5 or higher. Some of them, there were several that had 4, and there are all kinds of different people. I mean, there's the ones that have my build and the ones that are skinny, and some are kind of shy as they come across the stage. One even skipped across, but you could tell they loved what they were doing. They loved the recognition, and what we hope and pray as a school board, that what we pass on to them is a lifelong spirit of learning. And it was encouraging and great to be part of there and see that. Thanks.
Thank you. On February 4th, I had the privilege of attending the middle school students' authors conference. And the authors were Patricia and Frederick McKissick. They are nationally known. They've written over 100 books on the African American experience. And I think there were well over 100 middle school students that were experiencing the words of Patricia especially. And at times it was very emotional to listen to the experiences and how they wrote about the experiences. The conference was held at the First Baptist Church in Chesterfield, and I would love to attend again next year. It was just a very rewarding experience. I did purchase one of the books from Patricia McKissick. It's called The Dark 30, Southern Tales of the Supernatural. So I'm anxious. I haven't had a chance to get to it yet, but I will. And that evening, I attended the Parkway North Talent Show, and the proceeds from the talent show were to go to the funding for the people of Haiti. It was very rewarding to see the kids and their talent, and the gym was packed, and the kids just did a super job. On February 6th, I had the privilege also of introducing the 4th grade strings program at Parkway West, and the kids rocked the house. Yeah.
Last week, a couple of us had the opportunity to meet with our Government Relations Committee, where we have several citizens, parents, patrons, as well as some of our legislators and their legislative aides. And we had some spirited discussions about some of the things that are happening in Jefferson City, which some of you may know about. There's some very interesting things on the horizon, some good, maybe some not so good. It's a very interesting morning. And then yesterday, I had the opportunity to spend the morning with our PTO presidents and the PTO Leadership Committee, where we were given a presentation by Dr. Chris Raker about gender differences in learning, which was just fascinating. And it was very well received, and I'm hopeful that the PTO presidents will take the information with them back to their schools.
Last evening, I also had the pleasure of joining Chris and many members of our administration at the Spirit of Excellence Awards. That's a fantastic event that we do on a yearly basis, and was really heartwarming to see the smiles on the faces of the kids that were recognized last evening. I think in my welcome to the gathered crowd last night, I said that being a board member is often a lot of hard work, budgets and negotiations and late nights, but certainly events like last evening make up the average. And so I was very pleased to be there for that. Also, last Wednesday, I had the pleasure of attending Science Night at Pierremont Elementary. We had several parents offering our elementary students a glimpse into the world of science. Also had some representatives there from the St. Louis Science Center who put on a display in the gymnasium, and really was a well-attended and well-received event. So, anything else? Thank you. 10.0 action items, Mr. Major.
10.01, approval of minutes, regular February 10, 2010. 10.02, approval of personnel matters. 10.03, approval of checks and wire transfers for the weeks of February 11 and 19, 2010. 10.04, approval of financial report, January 2010. 10.05, approval of bids, quotations, and agreements. Yamaha Digital Clavinova pianos and dollies. 10.08, approval of GCPA.BP promotion. 10.10, approval of GCQB.BP&G administrative reduction in force. 10.11, approval of GCQC.BP release of contract certified. 10.12, approval of GCQD.BP resignation, release of contract administrative. 10.13, approval of GCRA.BP non-school employment. 10.14, approval of GCRC.BP consulting administrative. 10.15, approval of GCRD.BP tutoring for pay. 10.16, approval of 2010-2011 YMCA contract for 6th grade outdoor camp. 10.17, approval of purchase of elementary communication arts materials. And 10.18, purchase of Robotel digital foreign language software.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Can I have a motion and second, please, for the items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any items that need to be pulled to action or closed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Mr. President, I'm abstaining from those checks under 10.03 that I've advised Ms. Kland of.
Thank you. So on those items, the motions carry 6-0-1, and on the balance, the motions carry 7-0. 11.0 action items individual. This evening there are none. 12.0 report, there is none. 13.0 work session, none. 14.0 policy review, there are 12 policies on the agenda for review this evening. Are there any that we wish to pull to discussion? Hearing none, those policies will be moved to the consent agenda for approval at the March 10th, 2010 board meeting. Call for a special meeting this evening, there is none. Call for a closed meeting, March 10th, 2010. I have a motion and second, please, that the Board of Education call for a closed meeting on Wednesday, March 10th, 2010 at 6:30 p.m. and or immediately following the regular meeting at Central Middle School for the purpose of considering 1, legal actions, causes of action, or litigation involving the district and any confidential or privileged communications between the district and its representatives and its attorneys, 610.021.1. 2, hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting of particular employees by the district when personal information about the employee is discussed or recorded, 610.021.3. 3, preparations on behalf of the district or its representative for negotiations with employee groups, including any discussion or work product, 610.021.9. 4, individually identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, and records pertaining to employees or applicants for employment, 610.021.13. I have a
So
motion.
moved.
Second, please.
So moved.
Roll call, please, Ms. Kleiner.
Mrs. Castillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Feldman?
Yes.
Mr. Jacob?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. McCarter?
Yes.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Yes?
Mr. Davis?
Yes, the motion carries 7-0. Can I have a motion second, please, to adjourn the regular meeting in closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you for joining us this evening.
This is third meeting in a row. Jeff has called me an hour or less. That has to be some kind of a record, Mr. Davis. Except